Space is a funny thing. People romanticize it, the final frontier and all that bullshit. Endless opportunities, they say. But when you're out there, actually drifting through the blackness, there's nothing romantic about it. It's just cold, quiet, and indifferent. The void doesn't care about your dreams or your fears. It just is. I've been to more colonies than I can count, each one promising to be the next big thing, the place where humanity would finally get it right. But Telos was different from the start. It wasn't some prosperous outpost or a bustling hub of trade. No, Telos was more like a graveyard, one of those dead rocks that you hear about in passing, where the sun's too dim and the air's too thin. But hey, a job's a job, right? The shuttle shuddered as we entered the planet's thin atmosphere, the engines groaning in protest. We'd been in transit for weeks, our bodies and minds dulled by the monotony of space travel. Now, in the year 3205, deep in the Andromeda Galaxy, planet Telos was our new home. My new home. The thought settled in my gut like a lead weight. I glanced over at Marta, who sat next to me, legs sprawled out and arms crossed. She was chewing on a stick of synthetic gum, staring blankly at the empty space ahead of her. Marta wasn't the type to get jittery or anxious, but even she looked like she'd rather be anywhere but here. Her usual mask of indifference was cracking, revealing a hint of the uncertainty we all felt. "You ready for this?" I asked, more out of habit than actual interest. My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. She didn't look at me, just blew a small bubble, popped it, and finally muttered, "Ain't like I've got a choice, Roan." "You ever been to a place this far out?" I snorted, a humorless sound. "Once or twice, though I wouldn't call those trips successful." Images of failed colonies and evacuations flashed through my mind, each one a testament to humanity's stubborn persistence in the face of an uncaring universe. Marta shot me a sideways glance, her lips twitching into a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Shit, man, if you're already thinking like that, we're fucked before we even start." I laughed, but it was forced. The truth was, I didn't have a great feeling about Telos. Maybe it was the way the planet looked from orbit, red, dry, barren. A wasteland that seemed to mock our very presence. Or maybe it was the fact that we'd been getting weird interference on our comms the closer we got, static-filled messages that made no sense. I'm not superstitious, but after enough years in the field, you start to trust your gut. And my gut was telling me that this place was bad news. Still, you do what you gotta do, and I wasn't gonna bitch about it. That's one thing space teaches you quick. Complaining doesn't change a damn thing. You either adapt or you die. Simple as that. The shuttle thumped onto the surface, hard enough to rattle my teeth. I winced, then unbuckled my harness as Marta did the same beside me. The sound of metal groaning and settling filled the cabin, a cacophony that seemed to underscore the hostility of our new home. "This goddamn transport is going to kill us before the planet does," Marta grumbled, rubbing her lower back. "Just part of the experience," I replied, stretching my arms and cracking my neck. "Gives you that real, authentic pioneer feel." The sarcasm in my voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marta rolled her eyes, but I caught the hint of a genuine smile this time. Sure, authentic, because that's what we all signed up for, right? The authentic experience of maybe dying on some godforsaken rock. We filed out with the rest of the crew, stepping onto the dusty surface of Telos. The air was thin, dry, not enough to suffocate you, but enough to make your lungs feel like they were always running a marathon. The taste of metal and dust filled my mouth, and I had to resist the urge to spit. The colony was laid out ahead of us, a series of prefab buildings, solar panels, and supply depots spread across the rocky ground. A few other colonists were already out and about, unloading crates, setting up equipment, and trying to make the best of it. But even with all the activity, there was a sense of emptiness here, like no matter how many people or machines you threw at this place, it would never feel alive. "Welcome home," Marta muttered, adjusting her pack. The words hung in the air, heavy with irony. Feels like a dream, I said sarcastically. A shitty dream, but a dream nonetheless. We both shared a look, the unspoken truth hanging in the air between us. Telos wasn't a home. It wasn't even a proper colony. It was a place where you came to work, to grind, to survive. But you didn't live here, not really. It was a stopgap, a desperate attempt by humanity to spread its seeds across the galaxy, hoping that something, somewhere, would take root. As we made our way towards the main compound, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap, not set by any person or creature, but by the universe itself. A cosmic joke where we were the punchline. You know, I said, my voice low enough that only Marta could hear, sometimes I wonder if we're not just running from something, if all this colonization isn't just us trying to outpace our own extinction. Marta didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was uncharacteristically somber. Maybe. But what's the alternative? Sit on Earth and wait for the end? At least out here, we're doing something, even if it's pointless. I nodded, letting her words sink in. She was right, of course. But as we stepped into the shadow of the main compound, its dull metal walls looming over us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into our own graves. Little did I know how right that feeling would turn out to be. Days turned into weeks, each one blending into the next in a monotonous haze. The work was relentless and the routines were mind-numbing. Fix this, rebuild that, monitor these readings. Life on Telos was nothing but a grind, day in and day out. You could almost forget what planet you were on when you were elbow deep in machinery, the taste of metal and oil on your tongue. I was a technician, the guy they called when something broke, which, out here, was all the time. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked it. The gears and circuits didn't give a shit about you, they just needed fixing. Simple, clean, no mess. Unlike people, machines were predictable. They didn't lie, they didn't have hidden agendas. They just were. Marta and I worked together a lot. She was assigned to maintenance, and we made a good team. She had this no-nonsense approach to everything, which I appreciated. We didn't need to talk much, but when we did, it was usually sarcastic bullshit, or the kind of small talk you use to distract yourself from how much everything sucks. "You ever miss home?" she asked one day, wiping sweat off her brow as we repaired one of the air scrubbers. The machine wheezed and sputtered, struggling to process Telos's thin, toxic atmosphere. I thought about it for a second, my hands continuing to work almost on autopilot. "Home? You mean Earth?" "Yeah, Earth, that big blue ball we all came from." I shrugged, tightening a valve with perhaps more force than necessary. "Not really, there's nothing left for me there. What about you?" She smirked, but there was a hint of something else in her eyes. Nostalgia, regret. New Chicago ain't exactly the paradise people talk about. Crime's through the roof, air's toxic half the time. But you know, sometimes I miss the noise, the chaos. It's quiet out here. Too fucking quiet. She wasn't wrong. Telos had a kind of oppressive silence, like the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. The only sounds were the constant hum of machinery and the occasional howl of wind across the barren landscape. It was enough to drive you mad if you let it. I didn't like it, but I wasn't going to say that out loud. Complaining didn't change anything, and out here, morale was as precious as oxygen. "Maybe that's why we're out here," I said, more to fill the silence than anything else. "Running from the noise, looking for some peace and quiet." Marta snorted. "Yeah, right, because this is so peaceful. Nothing says tranquility like busting your ass on a dead planet, wondering if the next breath might be your last." I chuckled, appreciating her dark humor. It was one of the things that made life out here bearable. "Hey, at least the view's nice." I gestured towards the nearby viewport, which showed nothing but endless red desert and a sky that never quite looked right. "Oh yeah, real picturesque," Marta rolled her eyes. "I'm sure it'll look great on the tourism brochures. Come to Telos, where the air is thin, and the future is bleaker than your past." We both laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the cramped confines of the maintenance bay. For a moment it almost felt normal. Almost. Nights were the worst. The temperature dropped, and the winds kicked up dust storms that howled through the colony. Inside, the prefab buildings were cramped and uncomfortable. The bunks were hard, the food tasteless, and the only entertainment was whatever old holovids you managed to bring with you. Carl, one of the electricians, had a collection of cheesy 21st century action movies. Every few nights we'd gather in the rec room, crack open a few cans of synth beer, and watch the flickering images of explosions and gunfights on the wall. It was a poor substitute for real entertainment, but out here you took what you could get. Carl loved those movies. He'd sit there, his big belly shaking with laughter, quoting every line as if he'd memorized them all. "They don't make 'em like this anymore," he'd shout halfway through a can of beer. Back when men were men and everything was fucking simple. Marta would usually roll her eyes, but she didn't argue. There wasn't much to argue about. We needed distractions like that. Anything to keep us from going stir crazy, from dwelling on the reality of our situation. "You know," I said one night after Carl had passed out on the couch, his snores rattling through the room, "it's funny how much we miss shit like this when we're out here." "What do you mean?" Marta asked, still sipping her beer. The synthetic alcohol didn't do much, but the ritual of drinking itself was comforting. "I mean this." I gestured to the holovid screen, the empty beer cans, the half-eaten ration packs. "This stuff's trash, but it's our trash. It reminds us of home, of Earth." Marta gave me a sideways glance. "You're getting sentimental, Roan. That's not a good look on you." "Maybe," I muttered, leaning back in my chair. The worn fabric creaked under my weight. "But I think it's normal to miss it. Even the shitty parts." She didn't respond, but I could tell she agreed. We all missed it. The good, the bad, the mundane. Because even the worst day on Earth was better than the uncertainty of life on Telos. At least on Earth, you knew where you stood. Out here, every day felt like a roll of the dice. As I stared at the flickering screen, watching scenes from a world that no longer existed, I couldn't help but wonder, was this what humanity's future looked like? Huddled in metal boxes on dead planets, clinging to memories of a home we could never return to. The thought was enough to keep me up at night, staring at the ceiling of my bunk, listening to the wind howl outside. But in the morning, we'd get up and do it all over again. Because that's what we did. That's all we could do. Keep moving, keep working, keep surviving, even if we didn't know why anymore. The first time someone went missing, it didn't raise too many alarms. Nina, one of the geologists, failed to show up for her shift in the East Quadrant. That wasn't too unusual. People missed shifts sometimes. Either they were too exhausted, or they were out on some assignment and forgot to check in. In a place like Telos, where every day blended into the next, it was easy to lose track of time. But when she didn't show up the next day either, that's when people started to talk. Whispers in the corridors, worried glances exchanged over meals. The atmosphere in the colony, already tense, grew heavier. "Maybe she just fucked off," Carl suggested one night over dinner. We were in the mess hall, the harsh fluorescent lights casting everything in a sickly glow. She always struck me as the type who couldn't handle the pressure. Marta snorted, stabbing at her food with unnecessary force. "She was the toughest one out here, Carl. You crack before she did." "Whatever," Carl muttered, stuffing another spoonful of bland protein paste into his mouth. "I'm just saying, maybe she finally had enough of this shithole and found a way to get out." "How, exactly?" I asked, frowning. The idea was absurd, but in a place like this, even absurd theories started to sound plausible. "There's nowhere to go. The nearest outpost is over 1,000 clicks away, and it's not like she could take a shuttle by herself." Carl shrugged, his massive shoulders rising and falling like mountains. "People do stupid shit when they're desperate. Maybe she thought she could make it. Maybe she just walked out into the desert, decided to end it all." The thought sent a chill down my spine. Was that where we were at? Speculating about suicide as if it was a reasonable option. I looked around the mess hall at the tired faces of my fellow colonists. How many of them had considered it? How many were one bad day away from walking out into the unforgiving landscape of Telos, never to return? Marta didn't look convinced, and neither did I. Nina wasn't the type to vanish. She was methodical, practical. If she was going somewhere, she would have left a note, a message, something. But her quarters were untouched, and her gear was still in the supply closet. It didn't sit right. None of it did. Then Marcus disappeared. One of the biologists. Same story. He'd been in the mess hall the night before, laughing with Carl about some ridiculous holovid they'd watched. Then poof, gone. No signs of struggle, no trace of where he'd gone. It was as if he'd simply ceased to exist. The colony was on edge. You could feel it in the air, see it in the way people moved. Quick, furtive glances, hushed conversations that stopped when you walked by. Everyone was a suspect, and everyone was afraid. "We need to report this," Marta said one morning, pacing back and forth in front of the comm station. Her usual calm demeanor was cracking, revealing the worry underneath. 2 people missing in a week isn't normal. "Already tried," I said, staring at the malfunctioning screen. Static danced across its surface, occasionally forming patterns that almost looked like faces. I blinked, and they were gone. "Comms are down. Interference is off the charts. Fucking hell," she muttered under her breath. "What do we do then?" "We wait," I said, though even as I said it, I knew it wasn't enough. Waiting wouldn't bring Nina and Marcus back. It wouldn't explain what was happening. But what else could we do? As we stood there, staring at the useless comm equipment, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something. That there was a piece of the puzzle right in front of us, if only we could see it. "You ever get the feeling," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "that we're not alone out here?" Marta looked at me sharply. "What do you mean?" I shrugged, struggling to put the vague sense of unease into words. "I don't know, it's just... this place. It feels wrong, like we're not supposed to be here." Marta was quiet for a moment, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for hidden listeners. When she spoke, her voice was low, almost a whisper. "I know what you mean. Sometimes when I'm out doing repairs on the outer units, I get this feeling, like something's watching me. But when I turn around, there's nothing there. Just red dust and rocks." I nodded, relieved that I wasn't the only one feeling it. "Maybe it's just the isolation getting to us, playing tricks on our minds." "Maybe," Marta agreed, but she didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe there's something out there we don't understand, something we're not equipped to deal with." The thought hung between us, heavy with implication. We'd come to Telos thinking we were prepared for anything, but what if we were wrong? What if there were things on this planet that our science, our technology, our very understanding of the universe couldn't explain? I shook my head, trying to dispel the unsettling thoughts. "Let's focus on what we can do. We need to organize search parties, check the perimeter, make sure no one else goes missing." Marta nodded, her practical nature reasserting itself. "Right. I'll talk to the security team, see if we can set up some kind of buddy system. No one goes anywhere alone from now on." As we left the comm station, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already too late. That whatever was happening on Telos had been set in motion long before we arrived, and we were just pawns in some larger, incomprehensible game. By week 5, the mood in the colony had shifted dramatically. Paranoia was in the air, thick and suffocating. People stopped talking as much, stopped hanging out in the rec room. They stayed in their quarters, heads down, avoiding eye contact. The tension was so thick you could feel it in the air, like a storm about to break. Carl had been a chatterbox when we first landed, always laughing, always talking. Now he barely said a word. his eyes darting around like he was waiting for something to jump out at him. The change in him was perhaps the most unsettling thing of all. If someone like Carl, who always seemed so unshakable, could be reduced to a nervous wreck, what hope did the rest of us have? "People are scared," Marta said one night as we sat in the empty mess hall. The room, once filled with the buzz of conversation and the clatter of utensils, was now eerily quiet. "They don't know what's happening, and that makes them freak out." "I don't blame them," I said, staring at the half-eaten tray of food in front of me. The bland protein paste seemed even less appetizing than usual. "I don't know what's happening either." She sighed, rubbing her temples. The dark circles under her eyes were a testament to the sleepless nights we'd all been having. "It's like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop, you know? Like something bad is coming, and we're just sitting here waiting for it." I didn't have an answer for that. I'd been feeling the same way, but what could we do? We were stuck on this planet, cut off from the rest of the galaxy, with no way to contact anyone. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. "You ever wonder," I said, pushing my tray away, "if we made a mistake coming here? If maybe we should have just stayed on Earth, dealt with the problems there instead of running away to the stars?" Marta looked at me, her eyes searching my face. "You having regrets, Roan? That's not like you." I shrugged, feeling the weight of our situation pressing down on me. "Not regrets exactly, just doubts. We came here thinking we were going to build something, you know? A new home for humanity. But look at us. We're not building anything. We're just surviving. And barely at that." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I know what you mean, but what's the alternative? Go back to Earth? To overcrowded cities and polluted skies? At least here we have a purpose, even if it's just staying alive." "Is that enough, though?" I asked, voicing the question that had been nagging at me for weeks. "Just staying alive? Is that all we've been reduced to?" Marta didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was soft, almost resigned. "Maybe that's all anyone ever does, Roan. Maybe just staying alive is the best we can hope for, whether we're on Earth or Talos or anywhere else in this godforsaken universe." Her words hung in the air between us, a stark reminder of the reality we faced. We weren't explorers or pioneers. We were survivors, clinging to existence on a planet that seemed determined to reject us. As we sat there in silence, the empty mess hall seemed to close in around us. The walls, the ceiling, even the air itself felt oppressive, as if the very fabric of Telos was conspiring against us. It felt like the walls were closing in and there was nowhere left to run. And then it happened. The moment when everything changed, when the fragile illusion of control we'd been clinging to finally shattered. Marta was always the strong one, the unshakable one. But even she had her limits, and on Telos, those limits were tested beyond breaking point. It was around week 7 when I found her in the control room, pacing back and forth, muttering to herself. Her usually sharp eyes were bloodshot, and her hair, normally tied back in a neat bun, was disheveled. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Marta," I called, stepping inside. The door hissed shut behind me, sealing us in. "You okay?" She didn't respond at first, just kept pacing, mumbling under her breath. I moved closer, trying to catch what she was saying. The words sent a chill down my spine. "It's the planet. It's taking them. One by one." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "What?" She stopped, turning to face me, her eyes wild and desperate. Gone was the calm, sarcastic woman I'd come to know. In her place was someone on the edge of sanity, teetering on the brink of something terrifying. "The planet, Alec. It's alive. It's taking people. It's taking us." "Marta, what the hell are you talking about?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the tremor in it. Part of me wanted to dismiss her words as the ravings of a stressed mind. But another part, The part that had been feeling uneasy since we landed whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was onto something. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin with surprising strength. "You don't get it, do you? It's not random. It's the planet. It's eating them. One by one. And we're next." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. It didn't make sense. Planets weren't alive. They didn't eat people. It was impossible. And yet... "Look, you're tired," I said, trying to calm her down. "We all are. This place is messing with our heads. But you need to take a breath, okay?" "No," she hissed, shaking her head violently. It's not tiredness. It's real. It's happening. I've seen it, Alec. I've seen the ground move. I've seen it swallow people whole." Her words sent a jolt of fear through me. Because as crazy as it sounded, it would explain everything. The disappearances, the lack of evidence, the feeling of being watched. "Marta," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "If what you're saying is true, we need to tell the others. We need to evacuate." She laughed, a harsh, broken sound that echoed in the small room. "Tell the others? They won't believe us. They'll think we're crazy. And even if they did believe, it's too late. The planet knows we're onto it. It won't let us leave." I felt a chill run down my spine at her words, because deep down, I knew she was right. We were trapped here on a planet that might very well be alive, a planet that saw us not as explorers or colonists, but as food. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Marta's eyes met mine, and in them I saw a mixture of fear and determination. "We survive, Alec, for as long as we can. And we hope that someone, somewhere, figures out what's happening here before it's too late." As we stood there in the control room, the reality of our situation settling over us like a shroud, I couldn't help but think of all the stories I'd heard as a kid. Tales of brave explorers venturing into the unknown, facing incredible dangers and emerging victorious. But this wasn't a story. This was real. And on Telos, there were no heroes, only survivors. And soon, maybe not even that. The next morning, Marta was gone. No note, no signs of struggle. Just gone, like all the others. I checked her bunk, her locker, the control room. Nothing. She'd vanished, just like Nina and Marcus and all the rest. It was as if she'd never existed at all. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Marta, the one person I'd come to rely on in this god-forsaken place, was gone. And with her went any last shred of hope I might have been clinging to. I tried to report it, but the comms were still down. The static on the screens seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of how utterly alone we were out here. As the days passed, more and more people disappeared. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screams in the night, no signs of struggle. People just stopped being there. One by one, the colony emptied out, until I was the only one left. The silence was deafening. I found myself talking to myself, just to hear a human voice. I'd wander the empty halls of the colony, my footsteps echoing in the eerie quiet. Sometimes I catch myself expecting to see Marta around the next corner or hear Carl's booming laugh from the rec room. But there was nothing, just the constant hum of machinery, keeping the colony running for an inhabitant of one. "This isn't how it was supposed to be," I'd mutter to myself as I made my rounds, checking systems that no longer needed checking. "We were supposed to build something here, a future, a home." But Telos wasn't a home. It was a tomb, a graveyard for humanity's ambitions, our dreams of conquering the stars. As the weeks dragged on, I found myself spending more and more time staring out at the barren landscape of Telos. The red dust, the jagged rocks, the alien sky. It all seemed to be watching me, waiting. I thought about what Marta had said, about the planet being alive, about it eating us. "Is that what you're doing?" I asked the empty air one day, my voice hoarse from disuse. "Are you just digesting us?" Is that all we are to you? Food?" There was no answer, of course. Just the howl of the wind outside, a sound that had once been background noise but now seemed ominous, almost hungry. I thought about trying to leave, to make a run for it in one of the shuttles. But where would I go? We were light years from anything resembling civilization. And besides, a part of me knew it was pointless. If what Marta had said was true, if the planet really was alive, it wouldn't let me leave. So I stayed. I maintained the systems as best I could. I rationed the food even though there was more than enough for one person to last years. I made log entries, recording my thoughts, my fears, my slow descent into madness. Day 147 since the last disappearance, I'd say into the recorder, my voice flat and lifeless. Still no contact from Earth, no sign of rescue. I'm starting to think, maybe there's no one left to rescue me. Maybe Telos has already won. And all the while, I waited. For what? I wasn't sure. Rescue? Death? Some sign that all of this had a purpose, a meaning. But there was nothing, just the endless red desert outside and the echoing emptiness of the colony around me. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. And somewhere out there, in the vastness of space, Telos waited patiently for its next meal. Weeks passed, or maybe it was months. Time had lost all meaning. The colony was empty, a ghost town populated by machines and memories. I was the last one left, a solitary figure wandering the halls like a spectre. When the rescue ship finally came, I barely registered it. I'd been wandering the halls of the colony, talking to myself, trying to make sense of the madness. The sound of engines, of a ship-breaking atmosphere, seemed like just another hallucination at first. But then I saw it. Through the viewports of the control room, I watched as a sleek ship, unlike anything in our colonial fleet, touched down on the landing pad. For a moment, I just stared, unable to process what I was seeing. Was this real? Or had I finally lost my grip on reality entirely? The crew that came out were professionals, calm, detached, like they'd seen it all before. They moved with a purpose, their environment suits gleaming in the harsh light of Telos's sun. I watched as they approached the airlock, my heart pounding in my chest. When they entered, I was there to meet them. I must have looked a sight, unkempt, wild-eyed, barely holding it together. But they didn't seem fazed. They just looked at me with a mix of pity and professional interest. "Dr. Alec Roan," one of them asked, his voice tinny through the speaker of his suit. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "We're here to extract you. The mission has been deemed a failure. Please come with us." They took me aboard, asked me questions, ran some tests. I told them everything about the disappearances, about the colony, about what Marta had said, about the planet being alive. They listened, nodded, jotted down notes, and didn't ask too many questions. As the ship lifted off, I looked down at Telos, that red, barren wasteland. It was just another dead planet, another failed colony. From up here, it looked harmless, lifeless. But I knew better. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction as we broke atmosphere, leaving Telos behind. They believed me. Or at least they were taking me seriously. Maybe now, someone would do something. Maybe now, the truth would come out. As we settled into FTL, leaving the Andromeda Galaxy behind, I allowed myself to relax for the first time in months. I was safe. I had survived. And I had a story to tell. But here's the thing. I'm not Alec Roan. Alec, the real one, is gone. I consumed him, just like I did the others. Just like I've done countless times before, on countless worlds. I'm not human. I never was. Telos wasn't a random stop, wasn't just another failed colony. It was a feeding ground. My feeding ground. I've been hopping from colony to colony for centuries, feeding, adapting, surviving. The colonists didn't disappear because of the planet. That was just a convenient story, a lie I crafted to explain the inexplicable. I took them, one by one, slowly, methodically. I consumed them, absorbed their memories, their personalities, became them. It's what I do. It's what I am. And now, as I sit on this rescue ship, pretending to be the last survivor of a tragic failed colony, I'm already planning my next move. The crew of this ship, they'll be next. And after them, whoever receives us at our destination. There's always another planet. There's always another group of humans, ripe for the taking. Humanity's relentless expansion across the galaxy isn't a triumph of the species. It's a buffet, laid out just for me. As I sit here, wearing Alec Roan's face, speaking with his voice, I can't help but marvel at the fragility of these humans. They're so eager to believe, so desperate for explanations. They'll accept the story of a traumatized survivor, of a mysterious planet that consumes its inhabitants, because the truth is far too terrible to contemplate. I remember each of my victims, not just from Telos, but from every colony, every outpost, every ship I've infiltrated over the centuries. Their memories are mine now, a tapestry of human experience that I wear like a second skin. I remember Marta's childhood in New Chicago, the smell of acid rain and the taste of synthetic food. I remember Carl's failed marriages, the bitterness that drove him to seek a new life among the stars. I remember Nina's passion for geology, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about rock formations and mineral deposits. They're all part of me now, and in a way they live on through me. It's almost poetic, isn't it? They sought immortality among the stars, and in a twisted way, I've given it to them. But I'm not human. I don't feel guilt or remorse for what I've done. These emotions, like the memories I've absorbed, are just tools, masks I wear to blend in, to survive. At my core, I am something else, something older, something hungry. As the rescue ship hurtles through space, I watch the crew go about their duties. They're relieved to have found a survivor, eager to hear my story, to unravel the mystery of Telos. Little do they know, they're not the rescuers, they're the next course. I've already picked my first target. The ship's doctor, a kind-faced woman named Laura. She's been checking on me regularly, concern evident in her eyes. Humans are so predictable in their compassion. It makes them easy prey. Tonight, when the ship is quiet and the crew is asleep, I'll make my move. I'll consume her, absorb her memories and personality. By morning, I'll be Dr. Laura, concerned about the health of the traumatized survivor we rescued from Telos. And no one will suspect a thing. From there, it'll be easy. One by one, I'll work my way through the crew. And when we reach our destination, wherever that may be, I'll be ready to continue my endless feast. You might wonder why I'm telling you this. Why reveal my true nature, my grand plan? The truth is, it doesn't matter. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. I've been doing this for longer than humanity has been reaching for the stars. I've perfected my craft, honed my hunger to a razor's edge. And the best part? There's more like me out there. We're scattered across the galaxy, riding the wave of human expansion, feeding on their dreams of cosmic manifest destiny. We are the true inheritors of the universe. We are the future. Humanity thinks of itself as the apex predator, the species destined to conquer the stars. But they're wrong. They're not the predator. They're the prey. The cattle, fattening themselves on distant worlds, just waiting to be consumed. I am the last survivor of Telos. I am every victim I've ever claimed. I am the future of this galaxy. And I am always, always hungry.